IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, I'm Soumya, and today's All Things Policy, we're going to talk about Sero Survey. And to discuss about this, I have Shambhavi and Sunila with me. So let's start with the fundamentals, right? I would like to hear from Shambhavi and Sunila. What is Sero Survey?
Right. Thanks, Soumya. So as you know that the coronavirus is a virus, the moment it enters the body and infects a person, you have an antibody response, immune response, which is generated by the body. And that stays in the body for a few months, even after the virus is gone away, prepared to attack the virus if it manages to infect the body again, right? The detection of these antibodies in the body is a sero survey. Serological or sero is basically looking at antibodies present in your blood or serum. This is a little different from the RT-PCR test that we have heard over the past many months. The RT-PCR test basically looks for the presence of the virus in the body. So it detects a live infection. So it means that the virus is currently present. Whereas a sero survey is kind of a history of whether you have been infected in the recent past or not. Right. So basically, if you are seropositive, it means you have the antibodies against the virus, which means that sometime in the past you were infected, or you might even be currently infected. We don't know that. It's not even a diagnostic test, but rather as a reflection of how many people in a certain population might have experienced an infection with the virus in a short duration preceding the time of the test. Okay.
All right. Okay. So like you clarified, I think that was interesting that it's not just the past, it's also to gauge, what's happening currently. But if you had to look at, from then to now, what has been done this far in this context? Like you mentioned a few elements of it, but I think there's lots happening. And if you could clarify that, it would be great.
Yeah. So we have had, I think, 4 sero surveys so far. One from Mumbai, one from Pune, one from Delhi, one from Behrampur. And the idea is to figure out how much has the infection really spread. So as we know with this COVID-19, there are a lot of people who will show mild to no symptoms despite being infected with the virus. And so we really do not know how many people in a certain population might actually be infected or might have had the virus. This has important implications because you must have heard about this term herd immunity, that if you have a certain percentage of population which has the antibodies to the virus, then we will probably see a plateau and a reduction in the number of cases, and basically the entire population might become immune to the virus. To understand that, we have to figure out how many people actually might have immunity against this virus, right? So that's where something like a serological survey comes into play, just basically telling you about how many people have already suffered through the virus and survived, and we might not have caught them because they did not have symptoms, so they might never have gone to a doctor, and they might never have had the test done, the RT-PCR test done, right, when they actually had the live infection. So just going back to the point that I started with about herd immunity, while it is easy to make that connection and say that, hey, so many people have antibodies, which means we are slowly progressing to herd immunity, that's a leap of faith, because the antibodies that we are looking for from these sero surveys are not the long-term antibodies. So they're there for the short term. They'll stay for a few weeks to a few months. We have not done any of the sero surveys which will look at the longer-term antibodies yet. So whether this prevalence that we see now will actually in the future afford us herd immunity or not is something we don't know yet.
To add to that, as Shambhavi said, 4 sero surveys have been conducted already. But now the government of India, it's conducting sero surveys, I guess, in extended parts as well. So they have already conducted sero survey in Andhra Pradesh, both in urban and rural areas. And Delhi's second sero survey was finished recently, and in Mumbai also they are again starting with the second one. And they are also trying to cover other states as well, just to get a picture of what the prevalence of the COVID-19 has been in the country. And as Shambhavi talked about herd immunity, she mentioned that the antibodies that we are looking at, IgG, they do not actually indicate if we are progressing towards herd immunity, but they will at least help in understanding what level of population needs to be immunized to achieve that herd immunity.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Sunila and Shambhavi. That was quite insightful. But just looking at the kind of locations you picked, right? Hyderabad, Delhi, Mumbai. Why is it restricted to few areas and not an effort pan-India yet? Also because a lot of tier 2 cities are also reporting positive cases, right? So why is this heading in terms of limitation?
As I mentioned before, they're actually trying to cover up a lot of other states as well. So not just important cities like Mumbai, Delhi, or Pune, but now the effort has been to cover other tier 2 cities as well. So I guess we will get to see the results of it in the coming few months.
I think just adding to that, so this is not the antibody test that we are seeing. So this is not a rapid antibody test that is portable, easy to do, etc. Either the CLIA test or the ELISA test, which are used for these sero surveys, require some specialized training and specialized equipment. I think that's why we started off with the metros, especially where disease burden was high, with basically Mumbai and Delhi, and now Pune as well, to get an understanding of the spread of the disease, and also the fact that there was easy access to technology and testing facilities which will do this kind of test. So this is neither the RT-PCR test nor the rapid antigen or antibody test, right? So these do require some specific training.
All right. And if you look at the findings of these tests, right, the sero surveys itself, does it give any indication of, say, community transmission? Because there's a lot of information floating in terms of, okay, 60% if it's spread in the community, then, is there, herd immunity that's setting in? So what do these findings reveal?
Yeah. So let's just clear first what community transmission is. Community transmission is when you cannot trace the source of the infection. So when you see what happens in contact tracing is you talk to one person and ask them who they came in contact with, and then they say a person's name. Then we ask that second person who they came in contact with. So that's how contact tracing happens. But in community transmission, you cannot trace the source of infection. Now, what has happened is in these sero surveys, the prevalence that was detected through the sero surveys is much higher than the number of confirmed cases. So that indicates that there is community transmission happening.
Okay. Shambhavi, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just community transmission is more of a semantic term than having utility in terms of governance, right? So we have heard for a long while that ICMR continues to deny community transmission, whereas states have come out to say that, hey, look, I think we are in a state of community transmission. And as Sunila said, community transmission is basically when you cannot track the spread of the infection. So one of the important reasons for doing this sero survey, and I think why the findings are important, is because it reinforces the idea that there is a huge population that will get the disease and will not suffer extreme severe consequences for it, at least in the immediate term, right? We are now seeing from places where the infection first started, for example, that people who had mild symptoms earlier have long-term symptoms now coming up, particularly in the muscles of the heart, for example, or blood pressure related problems. So we are seeing those now, and we might still see some of these occur in our populations later on. But at least for now, we know that there is a major chunk of the asymptomatic population, which means that the high mortality rates that we were seeing at the beginning are not an exact reflection of how many people are dying because of the disease. So if 100 people were getting the disease and 5 people were dying of it, we were saying 5% as a mortality rate. But now what we now know is that maybe 150 people were getting the disease. We just did not account for those 50 people because they did not have symptoms. Right? and therefore mortality rate is going to come down. So the disease might not be as deadly as we initially thought it was going to be. We are seeing seroprevalence for about in Mumbai for on an average of 40%, and it drastically depends on whether you come from a very crowded area or whether you come from less crowded areas, right? So when they took samples from slums, we saw extremely high, up to 57%, I think, of seroprevalence. And when they looked at more middle class localities staying in societies, they got 16%. Now, one thing we have to remember about the sero surveys is that everything depends on sampling. And so I think that's why we are doing repeat sero surveys as well, to make sure that the samples that we have taken are of a good quality, that the sampling reflects the population overall. So I think that's why we are still seeing more and more sero surveys being done.
Yeah. To add to that, the Wire came up with an interesting article which did comparison between Delhi and New York City and London and Mumbai. So Delhi and New York City, they approximately recorded 23% seroprevalence, accounted for 1.9 million infections in New York City and about 4.4 million in Delhi. But the stark difference is that New York City had 15,000 fatalities shortly after the survey, while Delhi recorded only 3,200 fatalities. So similarly in London and Mumbai, both recorded about 5,500 deaths after the sero survey. But the difference was that London's death occurred among 1.6 million infected people, while Mumbai's were among an estimated 4.5 million infected people. So at face value, we can say that the infection fatality rate is much lower in Delhi and Mumbai as compared to New York and London.
While we have heard about the fundamentals of sero survey, what has been done and what it means to the larger community, right? With the findings you've shared, I would be interested in knowing, what more is in store, given that there is rapid testing happening also in the urban areas, in apartments and places where they have more positive cases. So, can you give more information about what to expect and how to progress, or if something is lacking, what is it that we need to be looking at?
Right. So from the sero survey point of view, I think what we need to be looking at is the longer term antibodies and how many people actually have them. That's a data set that is kind of lacking globally. And one of the problems that we are now seeing is we are seeing reinfections occurring in places. So there was a reinfection in Hong Kong. There were reports coming from the Europe that reinfections have started happening now. So people who are infected once are getting infected again. So one of the things we don't know about this virus is how long the antibodies to the virus stay around for and offer protection against a second round of the virus coming in, right? And this is extremely important for us to figure out how do we plan vaccinations, how do we plan testing. If you have had a virus once, at one point of time, do you need to go back to the doctor and check if you're feeling unwell, whether it is a completely new infection or not. So this has a lot of health questions that are attached to it that we need to figure out. So that long-term antibody test is, I think, is going to be very important. Second, we have seemed to have moved to a testing regime that is heavily dependent on the rapid test, and the rapid tests are not very accurate. So we really need to go back to the RT-PCR. We seem to have evolved an incentive around how many tests per millions we conduct instead of focusing on finding everyone who is positive, contact tracing and isolating. That definitely needs to change. And I think finally, just we need to be prepared for the fact that a vaccine is coming. It might not be a whole lot in the initial stages. We might have to allocate it to people based on whether they don't have the antibodies, etc. And I think from now on, we need to be prepared to undergo tests, to perform tests, and both RT-PCRs or some serological surveys to prioritize who gets the vaccine. So that all the preparation has to be focused on that.
To add to what Shambhavi said, what the sero surveys have shown is that there is a huge difference between the prevalence that has been detected through these surveys and the number of actual confirmed cases. So what this tells us is that a vast majority of infected people are still being missed out from the RT-PCR testing. That's why we are not able to get the right number of confirmed cases. And Shambhavi also said we are focusing more on doing rapid testing instead of RT-PCR testing. This just points out to that it is great that India has expanded its testing capacity from just a few hundred samples at the start of the outbreak to more than 8 lakh tests a day. But still, this is not enough because the results of the Sero survey are showing something else.
Yeah, but the rapid tests I think are very appealing because they are lower cost than the RT-PCR. They are portable. You don't need specialized training per se, like you do with the RT-PCR. But I just don't think that they are good enough. And yes, you could do them as a first round to kind of discard people from. I mean, if you're positive on the antigen test or the antibody test, you have the infection, so you don't need an RT-PCR. But it cannot be the majority of the tests that we are doing.
I think this also sets the context, like you said, for what next in terms of the vaccinations and further steps, right? Just one last question before we end is, in terms of how it leads to the vaccination, anything that would help us understand the current step is to make sure it's like the polio drops, or it's going to be at the derma level, or because if you look at Medico being available to give injections, or how easy it's going to be to administer drops versus these technicalities, or are they going to be more of vaccines which need to be given intermittently to sustain or go ahead? So anything on that front, Shambhavi and Sunila?
So what we know for the most likely vaccines are going to be intramuscular vaccines, at least at the beginning. And we are looking very likely at a booster dose. So 2 doses in total might be required. That's our current understanding of that will be the first thing that will probably be out in the market.
Okay, which also means we need more medicos who will administer this, because you need to be technically trained to administer.
Right. So you're looking at we should be training nurses, paramedical staff, etc. I think all of these centers will require one on-site doctor in case of allergic reactions. And I think there's a bigger need for more people, either through a telemedicine kind of a medium or just in clinics, because none of these vaccines are going to be as exhaustively trialed as, say, the polio vaccine or any of the other vaccines we use, right? Because that process takes about 10 years and we have condensed it down to a year, which means that there might be some post-market adverse events. So because we have never given it to such a big population, right? And each one of us is kind of unique in our genetic makeup. So we don't know if some people might have some sort of allergic reaction or adverse event because of the vaccine. And so follow-up with people who have received the vaccine is going to be extremely crucial. And that force also needs to be trained and prepared from right now.
Thanks, Sunila and Shambhavi, for good insights on the serological survey. And I'm hoping with our last question about the vaccination, we have some hope to look forward to vaccines that might eventually, though has a condensed phase of trials, will probably get us back to our routine. So thank you so much. It was great having you.
Thank you, Soumya.
Thank you.
We have the China Challenge Deep webinar series that begins this Friday, which is 28th of August. So we have the first one, which is the Deep webinar on the future of the world order. And we look forward to have you all on it. And you could register it via the link that's available on our events page. Thank you so much.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. So another really fun week on the network. I don't know if you saw this, but Varun Thakur was on Advertising is Dead. That was a really, really fun episode. Besides that, we've had some great guests all over the place. We had Ram Madhvani on Cyrus Says. We had Saurabh Mukherjee, a legend in the finance space. He was on Paisa Vaisa. He and Anupam have co-written a book, so definitely do check out that episode and go buy their book too. I mean, like, that would be another great thing to do. Uncle Pleased had a really, really cool episode with hosts of our other show, Mr. and Mrs. Binge Watch, Anirudh and Janice. They were talking about celebrity culture and how that's progressed over the last few years. And yeah, it's just been a really, really great week. One episode I do want to shout out. A couple of weeks ago, Pulyabazi did an episode which was just amazing. They were talking about the letters between Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore. Do check those out. Those are really good. And with that, hope to see you again next week.
Namaskar, dear Bandhu. My name is Ashish Vidyarthi. These are truly challenging times, and in these times, we need hope. Do take time to listen to my podcast, Begin the Journey. Available on IVM Podcasts, website, app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember, there is hope because there's one life and we are alive.